Welcome, everyone. I see people are joining from the waiting room. Thank you so much for being with us today. We missed having this last week because of the holiday, so thank you. It's great to be back and for the last few meetings in 2021. It's always great to see the friendly names on the attendee list as well as new names. So thank you for joining. We really love connecting with you every week about the HEALEY ALS Platform Trial. And tonight, I'm absolutely excited to have Dr. Thakur from the ALS Association with us. The ALS Association is providing substantial support to this program. Really, it's great to be partnering with the ALS Association. And so with that, I'll turn it over to you, Neil, if you can go to the next slide. And we'd love to hear your perspectives about the trial.
Thank you, Sabrina. And thanks for the opportunity to speak with all of you this afternoon. If you can go to the next slide, please. So what we're working on at the association is for a fundamental transformation of the experience of having ALS until we find a cure. And we're looking to do that quickly. So speed is a real focus of what we're trying to do. And by transformation, I mean making ALS livable. So people live longer, they have life-extending treatments that's making a significant difference in their length of life. That people have an improved quality of life, so they get to live their life the way that they want. They have greater engagement on autonomy and much lower burdens associated with ALS, the physical burden, emotional, as well as financial for them and their families. And we're looking to prevent the people they love from getting ALS. They may share common risk factors, such as genetic factors or even environmental exposures. We're looking to identify, understand, and reduce those risks, to reduce those cases, and also to reduce the harms that come with ALS, the complications, the pain, the hospitalizations, the associated conditions that come with ALS, and make ALS even more devastating and deadly than it is as it is. So if you go to the next slide. So to do that, we really need to focus on three things that we're looking at, not just with our research program, but with our care services and advocacy efforts working in combination. So the first is to find new treatments, to find cures, to make sure that more people are participating in clinical trials, and that there are more clinical trials, and that our research portfolio in the ALS space is really focused on impact and time to impact. And we're not just engaged in research with no clear time horizon to it. We're also looking to optimize the care and the treatment that we have. I remember, Sabrina, you came to one of our meetings and you gave a lovely presentation on shoulder pain, which is a terrible condition and preventable in many cases. And there's a lot we can do to avoid things like that. The hospitalizations that come with infections and pneumonia, and to just make ALS, again, easier to deal with. And on top of that, all the therapies that we have today with the technology we have, how do we get them to work in combination with each other? How do we get the assistive technology to work better? And then as new technologies, as new drugs get approved, as they get approved, to make them work in concert with each other in the most effective way possible for each individual with whatever type of ALS and whatever symptoms and challenges they have. And then, as I was saying again before, to delay the harms associated with ALS, to treat people as early as possible, perhaps even before they develop symptoms. And then as we identify risk factors, to do what we can do to reduce the harm of those risk factors. And that's where genetic therapies look very possible, but there are also some interesting studies going on looking at the potential causes of ALS to see if we can stop those effects early. So that's our research agenda in concept, with lots of care services elements baked in to make sure we get people to the right care at the right time, and an advocacy program that supports these efforts as well, to make sure our federal government is focused on time to impact, not only in the research that we fund, but in the work that the FDA does, in the work that Medicare does as well in the VA. So if you go to the next slide. This is a very rough schematic of our research pipeline, and you'll see there's sort of a funnel effect where we have a lot of work going on in biology and genetics and this preclinical basic science work. And the research gets harder and harder, and the studies get narrower and narrower as we winnow out ideas that don't work as we get to people. So that's the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And then once things get approved at this phase 3 time, we get into this phase where treatments are out in the world. And we have a lot of work to do to figure out how everything works in concert together. That's where we have these phase 4 trials. We can look at the impacts of telehealth and telemedicine. We can look at family and caregiver burden, natural history studies. These all fit there. We also do a lot of work on research and infrastructure to make ALS research happen faster. And so we fund data repositories, specimen repositories. We work on tools. We fund trainees, so we have more ALS scientists. And you can think about the HEALEY Platform Trial, if you go to the next slide, as part of that infrastructure. Oh, I'm sorry. And so to give a scope of what we're doing, we're one of the largest funders of ALS research as a charity. We fund studies around the world. Our active commitment is about 50 million right now. That number goes up and down as projects come on and time out. So if you go to the next slide. So the HEALEY Platform Trial is sort of in this phase in the middle of the clinical trial process. Some of these trials are a little bit early. Some of these trials, in theory, might be have findings robust enough to go straight to clinic. And so I'd put this circle in this sort of phase 2 space. And what the platform trial is doing, why we're so excited about it, and that's why we're funding it, is it makes that phase, that part of the pipeline, move along much faster. And so that creates some interesting challenges for us when we think about the portfolio as a whole. It means we have to think about making sure there's enough great drug candidates for the platform trial to focus on. And so we may need to speed up things in this preclinical discovery phase. And it also means we're going to get some results, new treatments into clinic, and we're going to have to think about how that new treatment fits into the existing treatments. And so we're going to have to build up our capacity quite a bit in this managing ALS phase as well. So while the HEALEY Platform Trial is funding these trials in the middle, this phase 2 space directly, it's making such a profound effect in how trials are happening, how fast they move, that I also think about this as a critical part of the ALS infrastructure. And we have to think about its effects on the entire research system, which I think are all are very exciting. So I think this is my last slide. I'll stop there. I know Sabrina's got some more exciting stuff to talk about, and thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. I mean, this was a fantastic overview, really amazing impact, really broad portfolio. As you said, really great to see the entire spectrum and see how, it's important to fund efforts at every level to be able to move things forward. So thank you so much for your support of the trial. So as always, as every week, we love to share enrollment updates. So if we can go to the next slide before we take your questions, I just wanted to share, as you know, we started 2021 by testing 4 drugs, zilucoplan, verdiperstat, CNM-Au8, and pridopidine. If we can go to the next slide. And at this point, we have completed enrollment in regimens A, B, and C, which I had to say, being in the middle of the pandemic and with all the logistical challenges that has created, I really think it's really extraordinary, example of commitment of the entire ALS community, and most importantly of all the patients, all the participants, the caregivers. They really put in extra effort to really join and participate in this trial. As of right now, we over 800 people with ALS have signed informed consent, and they've been randomized to any of the available regimen. Again, regimens A, B, and C have completed enrollment. Regimen D, which started 6 months later, is really catching up quite well. And as you can see, the numbers keep going up. So right now it's almost 160. So we'll be ready to announce that hopefully quite soon, really trying to get the last few people in before end of the year, so that we can hopefully announce that on this webinar. One thing I want to reflect on is that in addition to having people in the double-blind portion of the trial, we already have almost 300 people in the open label extension. So as you may remember from previous presentations, we really wanted to make sure that this trial would also be an opportunity for people with ALS to have access to the actual drug at the end of their participation in the double-blind trial. And right now we have almost 300 people in that situation, which is really remarkable. So essentially, it's obviously 2022 will be busy in terms of closing out these regimens because, for A, B, C, and very soon D, we will have completed the enrollment and we will have people, in the double-blind portion of the trial completing that. That's 6 months. At the same time, we're going to have increasing numbers of people in the open label extension. And so we will work closely with all the sites to be able to close out the data. There's a huge sort of biostatistical kind of a group of people, a huge team working to analyze the data, and that's going to be happening in 2022. And I'm really humbled by what we hear over and over from people with ALS, that they are participating because they want to help find a cure for the disease. And so really, this is really a partnership. So thank you for all you've done in 2021 and before. And if we can go to the next slide, also thank you for your continued engagement. Obviously, we will continue to work with all of you in 2022, and we're particularly excited about adding the fifth drug, regimen E or Trialos, that's going to be added. We'll start giving drug to patients in January, and we will have a webinar as part of this series. Representatives from Silos Therapeutics will discuss the mechanism of action of this drug, as we have done with all the previous regimens. So in the past, and we've had a description of all the science and why we're testing it, etc. Everything is recorded and stored on our website in case you missed them. And then obviously we will have one dedicated webinar about the new drug as well. Next slide. In addition to adding more drugs, we're also adding more sites. That's important. We heard it loud and clear from the community that people want the trial to be available close to where they live. So right now we have 54 sites that are enrolling. Those are labeled in blue. And then the green sites are the ones that are in the process of being added. They've been selected, but then there's always sort of administrative processes for sites to be able to be trained and incorporated into the group. Next slide. As always, this week I'm joined by Catherine and Alison, our fantastic patient navigation team, and they are a central resource for people living with ALS. They're always available to answer your phone calls or emails. And Alison and Catherine have been tracking metrics, and in the these weekly webinars were your suggestion. And in the first year that we've had that, we've answered over 1,000 questions live about ALS research, and we've had over 13,000 viewers from 43 countries, either live or because they watch the recordings. So really amazing participation. So we really love to connect with you. If you want to send, we also upload the slides on our website. So feel free to download them and share them with friends. And we have QR codes here that you can use to quickly register for future webinars, and also to sign up for the ALS link, which is our weekly or semi-weekly newsletter where we share a lot of information from our center. Some of it is about our center, our own ALS clinic, but I do want to mention that we post a lot of information about ALS research in general, including information about the platform trial. Next slide. And this is the rest of our schedule for 2021. We are really going around the country to get to know all the sites so that you can put a face to a name when you see names of different site investigators and coordinators. They'll be on next week. We will have Dr. Olney from Oregon, from the Providence ALS Clinic, and then we will wrap up the webinar program for the year with our biostatistician, Lori Chibnik, really a star of biostatistics. She's a professor at the Harvard School of Public Health. She gave a previous presentation about biostatistics in ALS, which I think was quite interesting. Feel free to send us questions. She will be back to take questions. So we will continue to build from the previous material that was shared maybe a couple of weeks ago. Again, it's on our website if you want to watch the recording, and we will continue to dive deeper into different biostatistical aspects of ALS research, which are quite important, things like, placebo, subgroups, responders, and all of that. So there's going to be lots of opportunities to ask questions live. And so with that, I would like to start taking a few questions, and Neil, hopefully you'll help me with this, and if there are some technical platform trial questions, I'll be able to address them. So the first question is if the chance of placebo changes over time, or because now we have essentially completed the enrollment in the first few regimens, and so the question is the chance of placebo changing with future regimens? No. So the good news is that no, we still want to minimize exposure to placebo. So the active to placebo ratio remains the same, 3:1 in favor of active. What this means is that for every 4 people who enter the trial, only 1 will receive placebo and 3 will receive active. It doesn't matter if there's only 1 regimen open at a given time, or if there's more regimens open at a given time. So essentially we are accumulating a placebo data bank that we can continue to use to compare new drugs to the shared placebo group. In fact, what we would want to do is to lower the chance of placebo over time. We first need to analyze the first few regimens. We need to make sure that there's no drift over time. We need to have discussions with the FDA about that, but certainly we're not increasing the chances of getting placebo. If anything, over time, hopefully that will get even better. And the question about the people in open label extension, how many are from each regimen? I actually don't know the numbers right now. I can look at the map, and maybe Catherine, we can remember to post something maybe next week, in a future webinar, we can give more information about that. I can tell you that across the board, the majority of people who completed the placebo-controlled portion of the trial, more than 80%, decided to go on open label extension. And again, the numbers are, plus minus depending on the regimen, but there's no huge variation. Essentially, most people wanted to continue. There's a question. Thank you so much for the nice comment about sort of the remarkable rate of enrollment. And really, I do want to say that it's been great for us to leverage the input from our patient advisors. We have a lot of patients and caregivers that have been donating their time as advisors, either as part of the patient advisory committee or as part of different committees, recruitment, retention, steering committees, etc. And really, I think we really learn from them to really design a trial and also create processes as we conduct the trial that are patient-centered. So thank you to you for all the input. There's a technical question about some of the regimens. So first of all, at this time we don't have results for the first 3 regimens, and I do want to clarify that when I said that we completed the enrollment, it means that we completed sort of the initial process for each participant. But now each participant that was enrolled now needs to complete 6 months of placebo-controlled trial. So completing the enrollment doesn't mean that we finish the trial. It just means that we shift to a different situation where we're not, for those regimens that are complete, we're not actively looking for new participants, but we're monitoring the people who are in the regimen at this time with the goal of releasing results next year, because we can only analyze the data at the end. We continue to capture new data, collect new data, but we cannot analyze, so we don't have results. And again, for the regimens that are completed, we're not looking for new participants, but for the new regimens, we will be looking for new participants. And actually a question for you, Neil. What specific role did the ALS Association play in enabling the HEALEY platform trial?
Well, I remember having lots of really exciting conversations with you and Merritt as you were planning the trial, and we were able to be a funder in that trial and serve on the steering committee. I do have to say, you guys have done an amazing job in implementing a very complex trial extremely quickly in multiple sites. And so just the skill that you guys brought to this has been very, very impressive. And it's been really nice to watch.
Thank you. No, we really, really appreciate the partnership. I think it's really important that this is a community effort because we're all working towards the same goal. Technical question about regimen D. The open label extension is being extended. So initially the protocol was written in, as some of you know from attending these weekly calls, it was 6 months, but it's been extended. So right now, basically, for all the regimens, we have long-term open label extension. What we really want to do is to be able to keep people on drug, active drug, as part of the open label extension if they want to stay on that drug for basically as long as they want to until we know the results essentially of the drug or the trial. So obviously at that point either one or two outcomes is possible. If the drug is negative, it doesn't make any sense to continue the open label extension, but we all hope that the drug will have positive results. And if that's the case, again, we will continue to keep participants on open label extension longer. Okay, so there's a couple of questions about placebo. So the question is, what is a placebo effect? There are historical placebo, are they not reliable? So if you don't mind, I'm going to give you a quick answer, but I would want you to join, please, if you can, the webinar on December 16th, and maybe we can send these questions to our statistician, because I really think we're really trying to have on this webinar the real experts that can, really explain this well. But it's essentially, in a nutshell, for a non-statistician like me, a placebo effect means that the people feel like they're getting better simply because they know they're getting something, some potential treatment, but there's no real effect of the treatment. In other words, it's something that it's something that's basically created by the very fact of participating in an intervention, in a trial, in a research project, and so that's what placebo is, and that's why we compare people who get active drug to people who get an inactive version of the drug, that something that looks like the drug but is not, doesn't have the chemical substance in it. So that's why it's important. That's a rigorous way of testing the real efficacy of a drug. In terms of historical placebo, that's a little bit of a more complex question. So in theory, it would be possible to compare people that take active drug now to people who didn't take drug in the past, or took a placebo in the past, or as part of a separate program. But as always, kind of the devil is in the details. The problem is that it's very hard to compare populations who are not part of the same trial at the same time or within the same infrastructure. That's why this platform infrastructure is so important, that it's, it has the same inclusion exclusion criteria, it has the same sites, they are all trained the same way, they all give, administer the procedures the same way, because that gives you, kind of gets rid of some of the noise or variance that comparing different programs would introduce. And that variance or that noise can become so strong that can distort the ultimate message and can really give you to give wrong results, basically. And that's why, again, hopefully we will continue to create opportunities to reduce placebo to the minimum possible, while also giving, for example, open label extension, which is, I think, the balance or the compromise, if you will, that we have in this program, so that we can give access to the drug, but we can also answer the scientific question, because at the end of the day, with the trial, we want to be able to tell if the drug works or not, so that then we can open it up to everyone.
I'd also add, Sabrina, that placebos are real. I mean, they're described in a way that they're not related to a drug, but they're measurable, and they occur in just about every drug in every disease area. And so it's a well-recognized phenomenon. It's not unique to ALS, and it's really important that we pay attention to them so we find treatments that really work.
Yeah. We have a question from somebody who said that was only able to join in late and missed your initial remarks. So the question for you, Neil, is can you tell us more about the contribution of the ALS Association towards the HEALEY Platform Trial, because they missed the initial presentation?
Yeah, I think it's about $3 million total. I think it's $1 million a year. That's off the top of my head.
Yeah, great.
I also see a question about support in Michigan, and I'd like you to reach out to me directly, and so we can talk about that. I want to make sure you're getting the support you need out of our care services program. So is there a way that we can move that person offline, or I can find out who that person is?
Maybe if, let's see, it's I think it's from Anonymous. So I don't know if this person feels comfortable maybe resending the question not as an anonymous attendee, or contacting the patient navigator so that we can connect with Dr. Thakur,
that'd be good.
if again, as an option, if somebody wants to. Thank you for your availability. And again, the question, just to be very clear in terms of the contribution of the ALS Association, there's a comment in the chat. So you, Neil, can you confirm the ALS Association helped fund the trial itself, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you. All right. So a few questions. There's a question about mixed messages regarding the COVID vaccination. Again, at this time, we follow CDC guidance. So, at this time, it's not, again, I haven't had any specific kind of guidance for people with ALS, but we, in our clinic, with my patients, I recommend to follow the CDC guidelines, which at this point, I believe, recommend booster shots for all adults. There's a question that's I haven't heard before. Somebody asked a clinical question about whether people with ALS can become very sensitive to smell. If I understand the question, for example, a sense of tiredness or difficulty breathing, if somebody, as if someone is smoking. I'm not sure I fully understand the question. I have not heard that complaint before. I don't know if anyone else on the panel has heard that sensitivity to smell reactions. So I personally have not heard about it. So there's a good question about considering open label extension versus going into a new trial, and then like how to make that decision. So I think that this is definitely a personal decision and something that is worth considering deeply. I think it's important to discuss that also with your ALS physician, who may have seen your progression and might give you some perspectives in terms of your progression during the trial, or what other options are available. So I would say that it's hard to tell, because it's hard to judge based on one individual's participation. So I think what we wanted to do by having the open label extension is to give more options so that people have that option. But certainly there are also many other trials that are equally interesting. And so if somebody prefers to try something else or join another trial, absolutely. Again, here we're just giving more options, and I would suggest that you discuss with your physician. There's a great question about combination of drugs, and I do want to say that I completely agree with the person who asked about combination treatments. I do think that for ALS, most likely we're going to see a scenario where people need to take more than one medication, as is already the case. There's 2 medications that are FDA approved. If there was another medication approved next year, that it will be on top of sort of what's already approved. In terms of testing it in the trial, that's also another possibility. Certainly, if medications are approved, we want to allow them in the trial, and with respect to this, there's another question about why are some supplements not allowed or not. So our policy is that if a medication is FDA approved, it will be approved in the trial, because once approved, it becomes standard of care medication. And so again, that's in the spirit of allowing standard of care medication, which obviously is very important, and also continuing to improve starting from standard of care. So combinations of treatments or new treatments. I don't know, Neil, if you have any other comments on that. I know you've been thinking about
I
combination.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, and we've been having a lot of conversations about how to do those tests effectively, because obviously the science behind that is a lot more complicated. And I'm hoping we're going to be in the happy circumstance of having lots of options. And then, as we know, there's lots of people with different types of ALS, and finding the right approach for each person is going to be very complicated. And so we do have to build up our infrastructure to study those kinds of treatments, both in the developmental phase, maybe even the preclinical phase, and then also as these new treatments will come out into the world. And so I'm going to be having, I think, questions for you as we go along in that path.
Yeah, definitely. There's a couple more questions for tonight. One question is, why are Tregs not tested in the platform trial? And maybe I can start, and maybe Neil, I know you're familiar with this program as well. So I think, Treg and different types of Treg programs are quite interesting. The trial that we are discussing here, the platform trial, is a large-scale, late-stage trial that could potentially lead to registration of a new drug. I think the most Treg programs are a little bit in the earlier phase. That doesn't mean that they're not exciting, just means that we need more data before we can scale them up to a larger group of participants. So again, we have been in constant communication with several companies, several different groups that are developing different drugs. And the question is not just whether a drug is good or not. The question is also, is it the appropriate time for them to join the platform? Do they have enough data on enough patients to be able to then join a trial like this one, which is larger? So Neil, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, we funded some Treg work, and it is exciting, but it is also early and not ready for the kind of volume or the speed that the platform trial can afford. And I think it's really important that we recognize the platform trial is not only about testing a lot of drugs for a lot of people, but it's also testing them very quickly. And so a program like the Treg would need to be able to meet that demand. And I think they also have work to do in figuring out how to make sure the drug is ready for a high number of people. That's not a trivial task for a complicated medication like that.
Yeah, generally speaking, cell-based treatments require sort of a lot of more production. The production needs to be scaled up. But I had to say, that's with respect to the great overview that you gave in terms of funding multiple, along the entire spectrum, like you're doing with the ALS Association. It's very important to fund programs at different stages, because in order to keep the pipeline alive and enable the late stage, large scale phases, you also need to do the initial work, whether it's in the lab or in early phase trials. So thank you for funding at multiple levels. I think that's so important. Yeah, and the last question before, maybe I'll give you the last word, Neil, before we break, but then I want to take a quick question. There's been a question about dropouts or reasons for dropping out from the trial. So there's, as in any ALS trial, there's people who have been dropping out and along sort of on the same average as other ALS trials. There isn't any specific concern in the platform trial. There is a separate independent data safety monitoring board that meets essentially every 3 months, and they perform the interim analysis for lack of efficacy, as discussed in previous webinars, as well as for safety. So safety is continually monitored. So if there was any concern in terms of people dropping out or other concerns like that, the trial could be stopped or would be modified based on, again, the continuous supervision from this other board. And everything that we have seen is in line with other trials as well. So I just leave the last word to you, Neil, to conclude this webinar.
Oh, well, thank you. Thanks for inviting me. And I do want to thank all of you, Sabrina and Allison and Catherine and your team. I know how hard you've worked and how many risks you've taken to set up a really large program like this very quickly. It's taken a lot of leadership, and it's been nice to see how well it's been done. And I'm also really grateful to all the people who participated in the trial. That's a a really kind thing to do for the whole ALS community that all of you are doing. And thank you.
Thank you so much. And we'll see everyone again next week. Thank you.